Comedy episode 840. You're the podcast in Assuming America, the Outdoor Sports Podcast. It is Monday, February 19th, 2024. People, hope everybody's enjoying a great President's Day morning, afternoon, evening. Hope you're celebrating William Taft and John Quincy Adams and all those great presidents that we all loved. I hope you're ready for a brand new loaded episode of the Torres pod. We got ourselves a busy show. College Hoops is here. We're going to open. We're talking UConn. Absolute freight train destroyed Marquette on Saturday. And my question is there a way to beat them? Can anybody beat them? Because this team is operating at not just a good level right now, not even a great level. UConn is literally operating at a historic level right now. I don't think enough people are talking about it, as we've discussed. From there, quick break. We'll come back. Oh, by the way, we'll also talk about the number 2 team in the country, the Purdue Boilermakers. Not sure if you heard. They also played on this weekend. They did not win. They lost to Ohio State. We'll discuss that. We'll obviously discuss Kentucky going to Auburn, that shocking win. Everybody left John Calipari for dead last week, and all of a sudden now he's rolling after beating Auburn on the road. And we'll wrap with a very unique interview. Okay, so we don't do a ton of NBA on this show. By the way, All-Star Weekend was this weekend. I don't care if you do. I'm sorry, we won't be discussing it very much today. But I only bring it up to very simply say that on Monday, so today, Amazon Prime is releasing a documentary about Giannis Antetokounmpo, Greek Freak, Giannis, Milwaukee Bucks, okay? I got a chance to watch it last week. It is unbelievable. I laughed. I cried. I did everything. It really is incredible. One of the better sports documentaries I've ever seen. I bring it up because Amazon offered me Kristen Lappas, the director of this documentary. And so I encourage you to stick around. It's something different, but this is really good. You will be watching this Giannis documentary, and it is so good. You'll enjoy it so much. Kristen does an awesome job of explaining who this guy is, why he's different, why he resonates, etc. So stick around to the end. Kristen Lappas, director of this new Giannis documentary, which drops on Amazon Prime today. I promise you'll enjoy. But that's it. There is no more time to waste. So let's get to the topic of the day. Topic of the day. Listen, here's the deal. This is really the first Sunday without any football at all, dating back to August. Okay, Sunday, Monday, Saturday, whatever, weekend. Last week we had the Super Bowl. Week before, we didn't really have a game, but we had those Pro Bowl games, and people were still thinking football. Obviously, weeks before that, we had NFL, college, etc. Well, I bring it up. This was the first real weekend that we jumped 2 feet into college basketball, and there is so much to discuss. We're going to get to UConn in a minute, Purdue in a minute, Kentucky in a minute. Before we do, let me just start with one quick thing. For the 8th or 9th year in a row, college basketball on Saturday decided they wanted to do this mock bracket reveal. Okay. So I've done this rant every year since they started doing this. But about 6-7 years ago, they saw the success of those Tuesday night college football shows where they do the ranking, top 25, who would be the top 4 today. Okay. And I bring it up for the sole reason that college basketball about 5-6 years ago decided we'll do the same thing. We're going to put out a mock bracket and everyone will talk about it. There's just one problem. They put it out on Saturday morning before all of the games. And so by the end of the day, it's completely irrelevant. It's shaken up. I've done the rant. And so if you want me to talk about that, I'm just not going to do it because guess what? Since it came out on Saturday, Purdue lost and Auburn lost and Marquette lost and Wisconsin lost, 4 of the top 16 teams. I don't get why they do it on Saturday. There's no reason they can't do it on Sunday. CBS always has a Sunday afternoon game. And if they did it on Sunday, we in the national media would talk about it. We would talk about, okay, Arizona's the 4th number 1 seed. Should they be? Should it be Carolina? Should it be this team? Should it be Tennessee? Whatever. We talk about, oh, this is a 4 seed, but should they be a 5? What about this team that didn't get in? It is the biggest, I think, just stupidity that I see in sports on an annual basis because there's dumb stuff all the time, but sometimes dumb stuff is unavoidable. This is completely avoidable and just doesn't make sense. Just do it on Sunday. My show would talk about it. Field of 68 would talk about it. I think even a First Take would at least mention it. I think every show would at least mention it. I don't think it'd lead First Take, but they'd be like, oh, Purdue and UConn, number 1 seeds, are they the 2 best teams? And they do a segment on it on First Take. Instead, they do it on Saturday. It becomes irrelevant by Saturday night. I just don't get it. But that first mock bracket came out on Saturday. I don't understand why they do it. With that said, let's get to some of the games on the court. I just want to at least address the mock bracket. And let's start with, frankly, what I think was the storyline of the sport coming into the weekend, right? And we even talked about it on Friday's show. What was the lead of Friday's show? I said, who's number 3 in college hoops? I said it was Arizona, but I think you could argue it's Tennessee, it's North Carolina, it's maybe even Marquette, whoever. Well, I bring it up because Houston would be in that mix as well, okay? I bring it up for the very simple reason of this. The argument was who is number 3, inherently implying that number 1 and number 2 are figured out. UConn and Purdue. Purdue and UConn. Some computer metrics like Purdue more, the polls like UConn more, but the big question is who's number 3, because those two are the 2 best teams in the sport. Well, at least until this weekend, where these 2 teams, one had a marquee game, one didn't, and they went in completely different directions, as UConn, with a historic beatdown of number 4 Marquette, Purdue on the road lost to a lowly Ohio State team that just fired its coach. So we're going to discuss both, but let's go ahead and start with the number 1 ranked UConn Huskies, who hosted Marquette on Saturday in a snowy Hartford, Connecticut, the beautiful XL Center. And listen, I'll be blunt. We previewed this game on Friday's show, and I said I thought UConn was going to win. I said I grew up in Connecticut. I know what a big crowd in Hartford is like. It's going to be electric. It's going to be crazy. It's the hottest ticket for UConn basketball probably in 15 or 20 years. I'm not kidding. Just with the way they're playing, the way Marquette was playing coming in. But I said I liked UConn to win the game. I said, look, Marquette, they're all about speed, quickness, forcing turnovers. And the problem is UConn's got guards that are just as good, just as quick, but they're also 6'5", 6'6", 6'7". And then on top of that, UConn also has bigs down low. So I think I picked UConn to win 79-72, I think was the final score. So I think it's safe to say that I did not see what was coming in Hartford on Saturday afternoon as the number 1 UConn Huskies beat Marquette 81-53 as a final score. That is a 28-point margin of victory over a top 5 team that came into this game on an 8-game win streak. And there is nothing else to say other than that this was a pure destruction, okay? There is no way else to say it. There's no way else to put it. And in a minute, I want to talk about what is actually the way to beat UConn, because I'm not sure that there is one. But where I want to start is with this game itself, because this was, I would argue, relative to the opponent, as complete a victory as I have seen all season, okay? Just look, and I know people get mad when you quote from the box score, oh, you didn't watch the game, you're just box score stealing, you're just stealing stuff from the box score. It's like, I get it, but I don't want to just be the box score guy, but I think sometimes the box score tells the whole story, and I do think it tells it in this case. In this game for UConn, remember, these are a pair of top 5 teams coming into this game. Let's just go ahead and look at the box score. UConn on the season, or UConn in this game, shoots 48% from the field, 37% from 3. They hold Marquette to 37% shooting themselves, 21% from behind the 3-point arc. They out-rebounded Marquette by, 18 rebounds. They were plus 18 on the boards. They had 18 offensive rebounds. They had a bunch of block shots, and it's also worth noting, UConn runs one of the prettiest offenses in all of college basketball, 24 assists on 29 made field goals. And so when you just talk about a destruction, just listen to that. 48% shooting from the field, 37% shooting from 3, holding the opponent to 36%, 21% from 3. Oh, by the way, plus 18 on the boards. It was insane. It was a demolition. And I'm here to say this. First of all, I do think because Saturday was the first real Saturday without football, it did feel like a lot of people that are just getting into college hoops. My phone was blowing up during that game. Like, Torres, the Huskies are so freaking good. I can't believe how good they are. They're dominant. They're incredible. And it felt like America, I think it felt like America appreciated just how good this team is. And I think they saw for the first time. It's one thing for UConn to play on a random Tuesday night. It's one thing for them to play on a Saturday night when there's an NFL game or major college football, or a Saturday afternoon where there's bowl games or whatever. It felt like America was locked in on this game, and America came away saying, my goodness, Torres, that team is a freaking wagon. And when I look at this team, listen, first of all, we talked about it on last Wednesday's show. Because UConn is so good, coming into this game, 23-2 on a 13-game win streak, I do believe that because they've been so dominant, the media has just kind of stopped talking about them because they've run out of creative ways to discuss them. I truly believe that in my heart of hearts. But I bring it up because at this point, media, you cannot gloss over UConn. Because I'm not saying that they're guaranteed to win the national championship. I'm not saying that they're going undefeated from here. I'm not saying that they will never lose a game. But at this point, they're not just good. They are quite literally historically dominant in many categories, okay? First off, I think this is very important to note. They're coming into this game, they had a 13-game Big East win streak. I consider myself a little bit of a historian of UConn basketball. Anybody who's a UConn fan will know what I'm talking about when I say this. I think about all the great teams of the UConn heyday. 99, they win a title. 04, they win a title. 11, they win a title, all in the Big East. 2023, they win a title last year. You know that coming into this game, that was their first 13-game Big East win streak since the 95-96 season. That was Ray Allen was on the team at that point. That was one of the great teams that didn't end up winning a title. Ray Allen, Duron Sheffer, who got drafted, Travis Knight, who got drafted, played in the league for a long time. And so to think about the fact that UConn has won 4 titles in the Big East since then. Rip Hamilton was never on a 13-game win streak in the Big East at any point. Same with Emeka Okafor, same with Charlie Villanueva, same with Rudy Gay, same with Kemba Walker, same with last year's team. It shows you how incredible this team is. By the way, I saw this stat after the win against Marquette. How about this? You know that UConn, right now this second, just became the first team in Big East history to win 3 straight games by 25-plus points. What? 3 straight games by 25-plus points. And I know that 2 of the games were against DePaul and were against Georgetown, 2 worst teams in the league. But at the same time, a couple of things. One, everybody's losing on the road to bad teams, including, by the way, Purdue, which we'll get to in a minute. But beyond that, it's not just that they're losing to bad teams. It's that the fact is, even if you want to say, okay, well, the first 2 teams weren't very good. The third team was a top 5 team. You beat them by 25-plus. But on top of that, and this is the part that I think is important, think about all the great teams and the great players in the Big East. Patrick Ewing's Georgetown teams, Chris Mullins' St. John's teams, Ray Allen's UConn teams, all the Syracuse teams. No one has ever won 3 straight games in league play by 25-plus points. And on top of that, let's take it a step further. This was also the biggest margin of victory ever between 2 top 5 opponents from the same league, okay? So it's one thing you catch somebody in Maui early in the season, they don't know what's going to hit them. But in league play, no team has ever won by that many points against another top 5 team. So this team is dominant. This team is historic. And I'll be blunt. You know what the crazy part is? I don't know how you beat this team, because the crazy part about this UConn team, and I've talked about it, and maybe you've listened to the show the last couple of weeks, and maybe you haven't as we've transitioned to college hoops. But I bring it up because with UConn, they really haven't had their full complement of guys all year. Donovan Clingan was hurt in the preseason, didn't really have preseason. Then he comes back. Then Steph Castle gets hurt. Then he gets healthy, Clingan gets hurt again. Then Clingan gets healthy again, and Alex Karaban gets hurt. So this is really the first time they've had all their pieces all kind of operating at a high level. And when you look at this UConn team, the question is, how do you beat them? So my whole thing is this. I'm not trying to be UConn homer guy, okay? But I'm just going to run through some stats, and you tell me. And by the way, I texted a Big East coach. We're going to talk about what he told me in a minute. So first off, here are just the facts on UConn. How do you beat UConn? Well, for starters, they're a top 5 team in offensive efficiency, according to KenPom. Don't love always quoting stats, but we need to for this segment. Top 5 offense. Number 11 defensive efficiency. Now, that's deceptive because their numbers are much better once Donovan Clingan came back. They were not good when Donovan Clingan was out. Then he came back, and they have been incredible since. So the defense is top 15. The offense is top 5. On top of that, here's some other stats just so you have. Rebounding percentage. In other words, the percentage of rebounds your teams gets, top 5 in the country. Assist to turnover ratio, top 5 in the country. They shoot 37% from 3. They turn the ball over only 10 times per game. And so I just want to ask you, you all are basketball fans. You want to be listening if you weren't. So here's my question right now, this second. If a team is a top 5 offense, a top 15 defense that's much better when they're fully healthy, they're an elite 3-point shooting team, an elite rebounding team, and they don't turn the ball over, how do you beat them? I don't know. And so it was funny because on Sunday morning, I actually texted a buddy of mine who used to coach in the Big East. He scouted UConn, done everything, whatever. And I texted him, I said, what do you do? And he said, Aaron, I don't know if there's an answer. He said, maybe you throw a bunch of different defenses at him. He plays zone 1 possession, man-to-man, full court this, half court that, da-da-da-da. Try to get them out of their rhythm. Maybe you try to really slow things down. Remember, UCLA did that a few years ago against Gonzaga in the Final Four when they were such a wagon, but Gonzaga wasn't this type of defensive team. And so he said, that's really the only idea that I have. And what he said was, and this was the part that tripped me up. He said, and listen, to be clear, nobody's ever rooting for injuries. But he said, if your starting point guard, Tristan Newton, and your starting shooting guard, Cam Spencer, are healthy, I don't know how you beat them. Because UConn's already proven they can beat really good teams without the other 3 starters. And so you don't want injuries ever. But he said, barring an injury, I don't know how you beat them. And so I look at this, the layout of this season. Now look, a couple things with UConn. Still have tough games ahead. They still have to play at Creighton this week. They play at Marquette the final week of the season. They play at Providence the final week of the season. So it's not as though they're out of the weeds. They still have Villanova at home this week. College game day will be there. But I just bring it up because you have Big East coaches saying, Torres, I don't have an answer. I don't know how to do it. Now I understand schedule will still be tough. I understand that it's a 1-game tournament. Anything can happen. I've seen teams that look unbeatable lose plenty in this tournament. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm not going to give people heartbreak, but there are teams that look invincible in late February, early March, and come tournament time, they don't end up doing it. But right now, my big question is, and by the way, here's the other thing that's important on this. I know I told you the bracket reveal didn't matter, but if UConn continues to stay on the 1 line and they're trending, it would take something catastrophic for them not to end up as a 1 seed. If they go to the East region, that's the other factor people aren't talking about. They would play in Brooklyn and then Boston to go to the Final Four. I think John Rothstein tweeted it. They won't have to get on an airplane in the NCAA tournament until a potential trip to the Final Four. So you have the best team playing basically 4 straight home games to get to the Final Four. Good freaking luck. I'm not saying they can't be beaten. I'm just saying there are people in college basketball that don't know how to do it. Really quickly, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the number 2 team in the country, my darling Purdue Boilermakers. And so here's the truth. Me and Purdue fans, we've had a couple dust-ups here and there. Sometimes, they've disagreed with some of the stuff that I've said. Some of the times they've been mad that I won't put flowers and rose petals at the feet of Matt Painter and Zach Edey and those mighty Purdue Boilermakers. But to their credit, I've been saying for weeks, they're the second best team in the country. They deserve everything they get. And by the way, I'll even take it a step further. When that mock bracket came out on Saturday before this weekend's games, which it shouldn't have, but it did, Purdue was the number 1 seed. I have no problem with it. You look at the resume, it's incredible. Well, I bring it up because they, like UConn, had a game on Saturday, or this weekend. They, like UConn, were a favorite. Unlike UConn, they weren't playing a top 5 team. They were playing lowly Ohio State. The same Ohio State team that just fired their coach a few days ago. The same Ohio State team that was second to last in the Big Ten coming into the weekend. I bring it up because Purdue, they went to Columbus, Ohio, and they took that L final score 73-69. And so look, I'm not going to do what you all think I'm going to do. To quote Rod Tidwell, Jerry Maguire. I'm not going to freak out. Or I think that was Jerry Maguire, actually. Jerry Maguire and Jerry Maguire. I'm not going to do what you all think I'm going to do, which is just completely flip out and crush Purdue, okay? It was a loss. It happens. It's college hoops. And I am not here to say that their season's over or they're this or they're that or whatever. I think they're a good team. I think they're better than last year. I do think they have a chance to get to their first Final Four in the modern era. They have not been since 1980. And I don't know that they'd be favored over UConn, but I think they could beat them. And I think they would be favored over everybody else in the tournament. So this isn't going to be Torres just tearing things apart and, going crazy, bull in a china shop, just shredding Purdue to pieces. But at the same time, what I will say is that this loss, I do think, in my opinion, and you're welcome to disagree, it sure does look like a lot of Purdue's other struggles. First off, Zach Edey. People think I don't like Zach Edey. I think he's very talented. I think I give him credit more than a lot of people do. A lot of people, oh, he's this, he's that, he's whatever. Zach Edey had 22 points. Zach Edey had 13 boards. Problem was, nobody else really stepped up, okay? They had a couple of guys score in double figures. But on the game, they shot 3 for 9 from 3. That is not going to get the job done. Braden Smith, their starting shooting guard, he actually played very well in his defense, 12.7 assists. But again, 3 of 9 from 3 is not going to get it done. And on top of that, they are a team. This is where I would be scared if I was the Purdue Boilermakers. All of the things that have made them successful kind of went their way this year. This game, excuse me. First off, it's worth noting, I've talked a lot about the foul discrepancy on this show. They were +9 on the road. They were +9 on the road against Ohio State. Now, that's credit. They're big, they're physical, they're tough, whatever. But I watch a lot of college basketball. I'm not sure how often, even on the road, a team is +9. So one, they were +9. They went 20 for 20 from the free throw line, which is kind of crazy, and they controlled the glass. And so they didn't win. And it's still the same thing with Purdue. I think they're capable of pretty much anything in this sport. Again, I don't think they'd necessarily be favored over UConn. Doesn't mean they can't beat UConn, though. Doesn't mean they can't beat Arizona, North Carolina, whoever they may play in the tournament. But I do think there are two things that we're seriously discussing with Purdue. The first one, I'll be honest. The Big Ten, I think, is only hurting Purdue this year. First of all, this was their third loss in the Big Ten, third loss on the road. And it's not like they're losing to the elite of the elite, okay? Lost on the road to Nebraska. Nebraska is a fringe NCAA tournament team, essentially has never made it. They've never won a tournament game. Lost at Northwestern. We know their history. But they also, on top of that, the Big Ten is not good. And so to me, that's where I would be concerned if I was a Purdue fan. Is this league giving me enough tests during the season? You're losing to middle and bottom of the pack teams. I guess Northwestern is kind of in that upper tier, whatever. But this Big Ten, I think the Big Ten is overrated in most years. But this year, more than any other year, it feels like it is just not good. Michigan, which should always be good, is in last place. Coming into this game, Ohio State was in second to last place. Ohio State should never be this bad. Wisconsin, everyone was so fired up about Wisconsin 2 weeks ago. They lose to Purdue. You think, okay, that's a great win for Purdue on the road. Well, Wisconsin's lost 4 times since then. I think they've lost 4 of their last 5. It's insane. And so you look at where Purdue is. I think they're hurt by this league. The only team that I believe is a real threat to make a real run in March, barring some crazy catastrophic bracket break in their favor, is Illinois. And Purdue only plays Illinois once. It was early in the schedule. Terrence Shannon Jr., the star Illinois forward, was suspended for that game. And so I just bring it up because the best team that you're going to see in this conference, you only faced once. You got them at home early when they were down their best player. And so I just don't I don't think the Big Ten is doing a good enough job preparing them the way that the Big 12 would, the way the SEC does every single night is a freaking war in the SEC. You don't see that in the Big Ten. That team that Purdue lost to on Sunday, excuse me. That's not a good team. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, even Tennessee, you look at Tennessee, they've lost some games. But at Mississippi State, tournament team. At Texas A&M, tournament team. South Carolina at home, tournament team. So even though they're losing to good quality teams. The Ohio State team they lost to is bad. The Nebraska team is fringy good. And Northwestern's good. The other thing, and I'll just keep saying it, Purdue fans, every time I mention foul discrepancy, this, that, they get, oh, you don't know ball. You don't know ball. Torres, you're an idiot. Okay, I get called worse all the time, sometimes by my wife. It doesn't matter to me. But what I will tell you is that there is no situation in the tournament where they are going to get the whistle that they get in the regular season. I keep saying it. Purdue fans don't want to listen. The bottom line is that refs are graded in each individual round of the NCAA tournament, each individual game. For them to advance, the powers that be have to believe that they're doing a satisfactory job, because every round that goes deeper into the tournament, more eyeballs get on those games. And you don't want to have a debacle where, for example, Purdue is plus 38 in free throw attempts, which they were against Northwestern. That's not a hypothetical. That happened. And so it's the favorable whistle is only going to hurt them in March. And I keep telling them that. And so there's nothing else for me to say. There's nothing else for me to do. Purdue's going to be fine. They're going to be a number 1 seed. They're going to win the Big Ten regular season. We'll see in the tournament, because I think Illinois is a tough matchup for them. But I'm not saying this loss is everything, but I'm not saying it's nothing either, as number 2 Purdue loses to the Ohio State Buckeyes. Take a quick break, come back. Long first segment, so we'll break this thing up. Quick break, come back. We'll talk the Kentucky win at Auburn. We'll also talk the rest of the weekend in college hoops. A couple interesting results. Quick break. Be right back. All right, everybody. Hi, back. Gonna be back. Do want to switch gears. Want to go ahead and get to the rest of the weekend in college hoops. Obviously, big stories when the number 1 team in the country has a historic win over a top 5 team like UConn did. And of course, it may be an even bigger story when the number 2 team in the country takes a loss to a school which just fired its coach. But at the same time, let's go ahead and move on to some other stuff. And what I'll say is this, is listen, I don't think you can sit here and say that anything is a bigger surprise than UConn winning by 28 or Purdue, again, losing to a team which just fired its coach. But there was one result that is worth discussing, because I just got it completely wrong when we previewed the game on Friday. That game, of course, is the game that took place, top 25 matchup in beautiful Auburn, Alabama, where the Auburn Tigers hosted the Kentucky Wildcats. I don't even know what the final point spread was. I think Auburn was probably close to a double-digit favorite when this game started. And if you had asked me to place a bet, I probably would have taken Auburn. They were coming off a 40-point home win against South Carolina. On top of that, it's worth noting that Kentucky, listen, they had a great midweek win over Ole Miss, but it was Ole Miss. How big of a deal is it? I don't really know, whatever. They had lost 3 of 4 before that, and I just thought bluntly this was a bad matchup for Kentucky. They are a great offensive team, but to this point had not been great defensively. They struggled on the glass last week against Gonzaga, and I just didn't think against a tough physical team in the Auburn Tigers that they stood much of a chance in one of the toughest environments in college hoops. Well, yeah, your boy Torres was dead wrong, as in what I deem to be a shocker of all shockers. Kentucky goes to Auburn, dominates from start to finish, final score 70-59. The Kentucky Wildcats get the win, and I got to take the L. I gave them no chance. A lot of you felt the need to tweet me during this game, and I don't blame you, because I came on here definitively confident that Auburn was going to win this game, and instead it was Kentucky which dominated from start to finish. Biggest win of the year for Kentucky, no doubt. They do have a pretty good resume, by the way. Remember, they beat North Carolina on a neutral, and of course, this Auburn win is huge as well. And so I think the question becomes, and a lot of people are asking, with this win, dominant win at Auburn, has this Kentucky season turned, and can they still reach those lofty goals that everybody had for them in the early part of the season, November, December, even January, when I was saying I thought they were one of the 3 best teams in the country, along with UConn and Carolina? Well, I'm not totally sure just yet that we should throw a parade and start booking tickets to Phoenix for the Final Four. But this was a major step in the right direction, and I do think the things that needed to be fixed for Kentucky, at least over the last 2 games, absolutely have been. Now, one, it's worth noting, the defense has just been better, okay? And what stands out to me is I think there was always this thought with Kentucky. Their offense is truly elite. And if the thought process was, if they could just be a little tiny bit better on defense, then it would open up doors for everything. And they certainly were a little bit better. They were a lot bit better. And that's what really, more than anything, stands out to me about this game. I know Kentucky scored 70 points, but it was not the offense that won this game. It was the defense almost in totality which won this game. Because think about this. Kentucky is coming into this game. They were and still are one of the highest scoring teams in college basketball, okay? Putting up, 85, 86, 87 points per game. They scored 70 in this game. On top of that, this is a team that on the season, even after this game, is shooting over 40% from three, just an insane statistic. Well, in this game against Auburn, they finished shooting, how about this, from beyond the three-point arc? They finished shooting 4 of 13. Rob Dillingham, who has been a star of stars, put up 30 the other day against Tennessee, and he has had so many big games, only had 11 points. Reed Sheppard has been a star offensively, only had 4 points, although he did have 3 assists, 5 steals, and 5 boards. But I just bring it up because I think the thought process was the offense was always going to be there, but the defense just needed to be incrementally better. Well, the defense was significantly better because the offense was much worse than it's been. That's not a knock on the offense. That is a credit to the defense. This was a defensive win. Beyond that, and I think this is really important as to the success of Kentucky in the short term and the long term, I give John Calipari credit. He finally shortened the bench. I think it was the Gonzaga game that we talked about this, where I just said, look, you're playing 9, 10. I think they played 10 guys like before the under 12 timeout or something crazy like that. And that was with Trey Mitchell hurt, okay? And I just said, look, it's February. You got to figure out who your guys are. Well, if you watch this game, Cal went with the starting lineup. It worked. Everybody was confident. And how about this? They had 7 guys in total play more than 4 minutes in this game. Outside of the starting 5 plus Reed Sheppard and Rob Dillingham off the bench, nobody played more than 4 minutes. Aaron Bradshaw, 3 minutes. Big Z, 1 minute. I'm not rooting against those guys. I wish there was a way to play everybody and get them 20 minutes and whatever. But it was clear he tightened the rotation. They were playing fast. They beat Auburn down the court. They were getting buckets, and it worked. And it worked defensively for the third and what I think to be the biggest takeaway from this game. Third and biggest takeaway was it wasn't just the defense. It wasn't even anything that can be quantified on the stat sheet. It was that they were the tougher against one of the toughest teams in college basketball, one of the toughest environments in college basketball. Kentucky was the tougher team. And when you go back and look at those losses, I think toughness is the name of the game. Go back to the Gonzaga game. Kentucky gave up 18 offensive rebounds. Remember, they gave up 66 points to Gonzaga's 4 big guys. Now, not all of them were paint points, but most of them were in the paint. And again, there was like a 6-7 minute stretch where it was just Gonzaga kept dumping the ball into the post. Game over, bucket, Gonzaga, okay? And so I just bring it up because it was all of those things. It was the defense carrying them for maybe the first time all season. It was the fact that Cal smartly tightened that rotation, and more importantly, it was the toughness. I don't know if you can quantify it, but when Auburn came in as one of the best rebounding teams in the SEC and you out-rebounded them as a team that's middle of the pack to bottom third of college basketball in rebounding, that is a successful afternoon, and that's how it leads to wins. Now the big question becomes, did Kentucky turn some sort of corner, and is this a team that can reach all that potential that we had for them in November and December? First off, let me say this. I get that covering Kentucky is like covering the New York Yankees or the LA Lakers, the Dallas Cowboys. Every single game, every single thing is going to be magnified. And John Calipari talks about that all the time. I can't hijack Kentucky. What I will say, and I've thought this for a while, it wasn't just because they beat Auburn. I do think like they lost 3 in a row at home, and that will never not be on the 23-24 Kentucky team's resume. Where that is never something that gets erased from the history books, okay? But at the same time, if you go back and look, was it ever really as bad as we were all making it, including me? I'm taking the L on this one, but including me in the moment. Remember, this was a team against Florida. They were up 3 with 7-8 seconds to go. Calipari doesn't foul. They hit a 3, go to overtime. Game's over at that point. But I had a Kentucky fan point out, they just foul. That was a game that they were in complete control of the whole game, and you didn't even know how they lost. Then they got Tennessee coming into town. That was a butt kicking of epic proportions. And then even the Gonzaga game. They had the ball with a chance to tie it with 15, 20 seconds to go? And that was in a game where they were down one of their key big guys, Trey Mitchell. And so I just keep bringing this up because it was probably never as bad as we thought it was. But at the same time, the question becomes, what does it mean for the rest of the season? Well, if we get the performance that we got on Saturday at Auburn, this Kentucky team is capable of doing anything, at least in the regular season and deep, deep, deep into March. But I don't want to spend the next few minutes saying everything's fixed, everything's figured out, this team's incredible, they're going to beat everybody. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is when you look at the schedule, if you can win at Auburn, there's no reason to think that you can't win just about any game left on the schedule. Now, the final game of the season is at Tennessee. That one ain't going to be easy. But in terms of the rest of the season, at LSU this week, you have to win that game. If you are a real team, you don't take your foot off the gas. You don't stop. You go to LSU and beat them up. They're a good team. They're not terrible, but that is not a team you should lose to. Then next week, you have Alabama at home. And that to me is the key game. Because one, you haven't been playing well at home, which is just weird to even think about. But you win that game. You beat LSU, you beat Alabama. That would be Alabama's 4th SEC loss. And on top of that, Tennessee already has 4 SEC losses as well. Kentucky has 5. That's significant because if you are Kentucky, let me make sure I have those stats right, by the way. All right, so what did I just say here? Okay, so Kentucky has 4 SEC losses, excuse me. Alabama has 2, Tennessee has 3. So I bring it up because you beat Alabama. Now everybody has at least 3 losses in the loss column. You're only a game back. You're certainly in contention to at least finish in the top 4 in the SEC, get the double bye in Nashville, which is so important. And then beyond that, and I think this is important as well, you're still in position to potentially win the SEC. Do I think it's going to happen? It would take work. And I'll say this bluntly, it would almost certainly take beating Tennessee at Tennessee. So I don't want to put the cart before the horse. But what I am saying is if you get that effort, if you get that level of toughness, of physicality, of defensive effort, you can play with and beat anybody, man. Remember, again, what did I say? This is a team that beat Carolina on a neutral court. You just went to Auburn and won. By the way, you've beaten good NCAA tournament caliber teams, at various points in the season as well. Crushed Ole Miss, crushed Mississippi State. Those are like the type of teams that if you're a 6 seed in the tournament, those are the type of team that you will be facing in the first round, and you've destroyed them. But now it's, can you get it going consistently? Can you get this defensive effort consistently? Because if you can, as Michael Jordan once said, the ceiling is the roof. Now, I think what he meant to say was there is no ceiling, but as Michael Jordan said, the ceiling is the roof, but you have to do it. So credit to Kentucky. I could go on and on. They play at LSU Wednesday. Again, just a must win. Just Kentucky for once, just go out and do what you're supposed to do. Just smack them around. You'll be probably a 4 or 5 point road favorite. I know everybody's losing on the road this year, including Purdue on Sunday, but just go out and do what you got to do. Smack them, get some hype, get some momentum going into that Alabama game. Then I'll tell you what, I think you can have success against the Tide when they come to town next Saturday. From the Auburn perspective, listen, I think the big story obviously is the injury to one of their star forwards, Jalen Williams. I don't know that we have anything official yet. I've seen some stuff, obviously, over the last couple hours in the lead up to our taping here on Sunday, and it appears as though he will be back at some point this season. No specific timetable was given, but he is expected to be back. I mean, that's a best case scenario. As long as he's back, he is so important to what Auburn does. 13 points per game, 4.5 rebounds. And it was funny. I was watching Auburn, and I think, again, they have 3 or 4 emotional leaders on that team. KD Johnson, Jalen Williams, the kid that got injured, and then also Dylan Cardwell, man. Like that whole Auburn team, like when it gets going and they're putting their ears up to the crowd, like they're a really fun team to watch. So you got to get Jalen Williams back. You got to get him healthy. But I don't think any opinion of mine has changed on what they are capable of. Like I said, just got to go ahead and get healthy there. A couple of the results from Saturday. Listen, I want to spend some time. I'll do a bigger segment on this at some point. We got to give Nate Oates some flowers, man. Nate Oates is such a beast, okay? So Alabama at home destroyed Texas A&M. And Texas A&M is a weird team. I think you can argue they're one of the most disappointing teams in the country this year. They were picked to finish second in the SEC. Well, they lost to Alabama to fall to 15-10 and 6-6 overall in the league. And that's just a program, they look great some nights. They beat Tennessee at home. They beat Kentucky at home. They look awful on others. They lost at Vandy during the week, and then they lost at Alabama over the weekend. And what's crazy is the schedule does not get any easier. They still have at Tennessee, South Carolina, Mississippi State, Ole Miss. But I just bring up Texas A&M is probably one of the most disappointing teams in the country. But we got to give flowers to Nate Oates. This team, I think it's easy to just say, well, Oates has it rolling, whatever. Remember, first of all, Nate Oates lost all three of his assistant coaches last season, coming out of the season, okay? On top of that, 5 of his top 6 scorers off of last year's team that went to the Sweet 16, won the SEC regular season, won the SEC tournament, are gone. 2 of them were first-round picks, Noah Clowney and, of course, Brandon Miller, who's going crazy in the NBA right now. And so I just bring it up like I think because Nate Oates has been awesome, like we just have this de facto, well, I mean, it's Nate Oates, it's Alabama, of course they're going to be in contention. It's like, no. There was nothing on paper that made us think, okay, that this is a team that could potentially topple Tennessee, topple Kentucky, topple whoever in the SEC this year. I think I had them like 4th or 5th. I think I had them about 22nd, 23rd, 24th in the SEC standings. And I actually thought maybe was I overrating them going in. They're now 10-2. They destroy a very good team. Listen, Nate Oates is doing incredible. We'll do at some point our like national coach of the year and all that stuff. I would give the national coach of the year to Dan Hurley right now. But if Nate Oates wins the SEC, I think that's as good of a coaching job as anyone's done all season long, because this is a team, they lost 5 of their top 6 guys, 2 first-round picks, and they are still in position to win the SEC, so credit to them. I'm trying to think of what other results really stood out on Saturday. I think that's really it in terms of the significance of Saturday. Just looking at some scores here really quick. Let's take a look. Let's see what else I missed. Tennessee rolled. Duke won on the road, which is no easy task. Listen, credit to Kansas. They go to Oklahoma. I don't think Oklahoma's playing very well right now, but after Kansas just got obliterated on Monday night by the Texas Tech Red Raiders, credit to Kansas for going on the road and getting a win. Their star forward, Kevin McCullough, was back. The Iowa State Cyclones, who we talked about on the last episode on Wednesday, I guess it was 2 episodes ago. Iowa State has won 4 of 5 and 4 straight and 7 of its last 8 in the toughest conference in college basketball. That Texas Tech was tied with them coming into the weekend, or Texas Tech was right behind them in the standings coming into the weekend. And essentially they just, I don't want to say they obliterated them, but they basically obliterated them. It wasn't close until the final few minutes. Texas Tech made a run late, but this is a team in Iowa State that has already beaten Houston. This is a team that has already beaten Kansas. It's worth noting there was a buzzer beater that was called back that would have beaten Baylor at Baylor. Iowa State probably doesn't get enough credit that they deserve. All right, that's what we're going to do. I think we're going to take a quick break, and I think we're going to come back. And when we come back, I'll tell you what we'll do. We will talk about, we're going to have a cool interview. So this is the deal. So today, Monday, February 19th, there is a new documentary debuting on Amazon Prime. It is about Giannis Antetokounmpo, the NBA superstar. He is just an unbelievable story, and this documentary captures it all, okay? So the documentary is called Giannis, The Marvelous Journey. It debuts today. I got a chance to see it last week. One of the best documentaries that I have seen in a long time, chronicling his journey from Greece, the parents' struggle, to the NBA, to his life now. It is one of the great documentaries I've seen, and the director of that documentary, Kristen Lappas, will join me momentarily. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back. The Giannis documentary. You're going to want to listen to this interview. Quick break. Be right back. All right, joining me via Zoom. Very excited about this. So on Monday night, February 19th, a new documentary is out on Amazon Prime. It is titled Giannis, The Marvelous Journey, and it is very much about what you think it is about. It is about the star basketball player, Giannis Antetokounmpo, his story, his journey, his family. The director of that piece that is out Monday, I think we'll probably run this on Monday. It's out today. Kristen Lappas is joining us. Kristen, how are you today? And frankly, how excited are you that the world is going to be able to get to see this here soon?
I'm good. I'm relieved. It's been a long journey. We started filming with Giannis and his family in the spring of 2022. So it's been a year and a half basically. And yeah, just thrilled that people are going to be able to see it and just see how remarkable this family is.
So I know, obviously, you have a background at ESPN. You've done a lot of stuff in the sports space, but the production was done, or it's under the umbrella of Giannis's company. Like, how did you get involved with this? Like, when did you find out? Hey, I'm spending X amount of time with Giannis and his family.
Yeah, so I work for a company called Words and Pictures, which
Okay.
was founded by Connor Shell, who created 30, or one of the co-creators of 30 for 30 with Bill Simmons. And so it's a co-partnership between us, which
Okay.
is Words and Pictures, and Giannis's production company. But one thing that was really important for us is that like we want to make sure that this film is as authentic as possible. Obviously, audiences are very savvy these days, and like we don't want just like a puff piece. We wanted to really tell the story, get into the details. And his company and more importantly, Giannis and his family were really on board with that. I am a Greek American.
Oh, okay.
Uh, I'm 100% Greek, and I grew up in a basketball family. My dad was a college coach for 25 years. He coached at Villanova for a long time. So I like kind of came from like the Greek and then the basketball kind of
Sure.
culture and passion. And when we started talking to Giannis's people, they were like, what do you think of this? Is this something that you'd want to come on board and do? And I do try to only take on projects that I feel a sense of connection to. I just think you do better work when you feel a passion for the story and the subject. And it was like obviously an emphatic yes. I had been a fan of Giannis's and followed his story since he was drafted, so it was kind of a no-brainer for me.
Yeah, by the way, as someone who grew up in Connecticut in the mid 90s, I might have a old school Big East basketball question for you or two at the end to wrap the show. But
Ooh, I love
yeah,
it.
so for people, everyone's going to get a chance to watch this. And I think, and I've seen you do other interviews where you said, listen, the story has been told, but not like this. For people who are going to immerse themselves, maybe they know a little bit, brothers that play in the NBA, obviously Greek immigrants coming to this country. But for people who maybe just know those very loose baseline topics about the family and about his journey, which is again the title of the piece, the documentary, excuse me, like tell us what they are like, and then more importantly, what it was like to spend so much time with them.
So they're very private. I'm just
Really?
going to that. Yes, at
That's interesting.
first. I mean, you
Oh,
have to
sure,
earn
sure.
their
Of
trust.
course,
You
of
know what I
course, yeah.
mean? Like you have to earn their trust and respect. We started off slow. We didn't want to like, bombard them and kind of be in there. Like I just wanted to kind of ease into it. The first summer we spent some time with them in Greece. And again, I do think that the cultural similarities and like me being able to connect with them on that level was important. Like I remember one of the first times I saw them, I made a joke. There's a saying in Greek called "kolos kevraki," which is you're so close with your family. It's like a it's like a butt and underwear is like the direct
Sure,
translation.
sure.
But I said that to them because my uncle and my dad were always called Koloske Vreki. So I asked them, I was like, is that how people describe you? And they started laughing. And we kind of had that as an icebreaker moment. They're remarkable. They're wonderful, wonderful people. They came from nothing, so they appreciate everything. This is a great story that, wasn't in the film, but one of the first times I filmed with Giannis, it was at this really fancy restaurant that they were going to commemorate the 5-year anniversary of his dad's passing. And so they had a reservation. It's like right on the water, like really like beautiful, elegant place. And he shows up to the restaurant. Mariah, his fiance, drops him off, and he has a microwave pizza in the car with him, and he's
Okay.
eating the microwave pizza. And he's like, "This is the real me. Like I'm not fancy. Like I don't like this isn't." This is more me. He's just very down to earth, really introspective, and kind of wise beyond his years for a 27-year-old. And just
Hmm.
has been through so much that I feel like he is able to kind of reflect and speak on topics that I've never heard a 27-year-old kind of speak to, like, you know, after a loved one passes away, like you don't have anything to fear after that, and you're able to be kind of free in order to like achieve your fullest potential. Things like that I just aren't common for a 27-year-old to say.
Well, I was going to say too, when I said what are they like, and you said they're private, and I said really, I think people when they see the documentary will understand. But I was telling you a little bit before we started, Kristen, that my wife's family are immigrants, and they are very much whatever the Greek term is. They're from Guatemala. They are very much the same. We are getting ready. We had to take a road trip this weekend. All four of them, my wife, my sister-in-law, and her parents are going to be in the car. They're going to be all over each other. They're going to be mad. They're going to be happy. They'll be fighting. 10 minutes later, they'll be laughing. And that is what Giannis's family very much reminded me of. But I was going to say, too, the other thing that stood out to me is exactly what you said. And that's a very poignant part of the movie, I thought, was obviously, look, the passing of his father was terrible. But I actually I probably shouldn't say this, but I screen grabbed that exact moment. He says something to the effect of, my gravestone's going to say 1994, and there's going to be another mark on it at the end. And that was just one of my big takeaways. I've heard him speak publicly. I've heard him speak at a press conference or whatever. And he's not even the oldest child. Like sometimes, if the oldest child has to be and he was a father figure to his two younger ones, but he just strikes me as just such an incredibly thoughtful person. And would love I know you just gave a bunch of great stories there, but just some perspective on spending as much time with him as you got to do.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that he's not the oldest. He does have two older brothers. But the thing about him is that once his father passed away, he really did become like the head of the household, even though he's not the oldest, which I think is really interesting. Like even Thanasis, his older brother, like really defers to him and looks up to him.
Interesting.
That's just the dynamic. He was the one who moved his mom into his home. He felt a sense of obligation and responsibility to make sure she was okay. So he really did take on that kind of father figure in the family once Charles passed away. But yeah, I mean, listen, I did all of my research. I read every article and every book that had ever been written about Giannis Antetokounmpo. But before now, the story had never been told through their words. And so I was really, really hopeful. And any filmmaker will say this, that like when you go into those interviews, you have this wealth of knowledge, but you're praying that they say something that's different and surprising and that hasn't been out there. And I think there was a lot of that, like a lot of that. And again, like the passing of his dad, he really hasn't talked about a lot. He told me he was going to quit playing basketball. Like, I don't think that's there. And kind of how it impacted him as both a player and a man. I think that, he wanted to become a father at such a young age because of his dad's passing, because it was so important to him to be in that father-son relationship. And so, yeah, I mean, again, he's great with his kids. Like he's fun, he's funny, he has a great sense of humor. But again, like it all comes back to like, I had nothing and I'm terrified of going back to that place. And so every single day he's just working, 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 working because he's afraid of going back. And that's not just like a cliche that he says. It's truly like in his heart of hearts what he believes.
Well, that was what I thought was interesting was I think it was either after the second MVP or after the championship, he felt like he actually took it to another level after that, which was kind of mind blowing to me. What was I going to say? Oh, the other thing I think was very interesting about it was you had a lot of great footage of when he first came to America, and I thought again that with the family dynamic, there was an interesting. He was developing, he was coming along, he was playing in NBA games, but his family, or excuse me, the Bucks feel like he took it to another level when that whole family unit was together in Milwaukee. And one, just how do you, as somebody who's not versed in this documentary film world, I mean, how do you even find that stuff? And then how valuable is it when you're doing this? Because there was so much great stuff from when he first got here.
Yeah, it's a great point that you make. We were really, really lucky, and we knew this going into the
Oh,
project,
great.
that there had been a videographer. His name is Nick Monroe. He is now like one of Giannis's closest confidants, but at the time he worked on the video team for the Milwaukee Bucks. And he just saw something in Giannis and thought that like it was a really cool and endearing story. And he did film with him a lot that first year. And so all of that footage is like, Nick Monroe's footage that he captured. And what's really special about this project is like you're able to bring that part of his life that obviously we weren't there for filming.
Yes.
You're allowed to bring it, you're able to bring it to life through this amazing footage of the first time he steps into the practice facility and, making pizzas in a pizzeria in
Yes,
Milwaukee,
this is great. Yeah, yeah.
learning how to drive, like all of that was documented. And honestly, like when we go into deciding whether or not to make a film, that archival is really, really important. It's different than like, radio or podcasts, obviously, like you need the visuals and not every story has those. So we definitely take a look at that, and like the wealth of archival made this story even more, I don't know, enticing and interesting to tell for me.
What is the relationship before and even now with the city of Milwaukee? Because we know how the NBA world is, guys come, guys go, but it feels like he has a really close relationship. I'm just thinking about there's a scene in the movie where I forget what it was. He was sending money home and he ran out of money, and so he had to run to the arena or something like that. But like it feels like he has a special relationship with that specific city that he's been for the last 10 or 12 years.
He absolutely does. It's one of the most unique relationships between a player and a franchise and city that I've ever seen. And I've worked in sports for 15 years. He truly feels like that's home. He's told me no matter where I retire to or where I go, I will always have a house in
Oh,
Milwaukee
wow.
because it's the place that accepted me when I was a no one. And his family came to America for the first time when he was drafted. So they didn't know Los Angeles and New York and Miami. To them, Milwaukee was kind of like the promised land. And so it's all about like the lens that you see the world through, right? Like they didn't know anything else. And so for them, Milwaukee was the greatest thing ever. Early on, when I started to do the research for this project, I realized that Milwaukee was like a character in this thing. Like it wasn't just the place he plays. It was a feeling, it was a personality. Like he and Milwaukee are just this like very unique and unlikely pairing. And so it was important for me to include stories like you mentioned, Giannis sending money back to his family at home, and he didn't have any money to pay a cab driver. And so he starts running on the side of the highway to a game, and a fan picks him up and drives him because it's 10 degrees out and he doesn't have a jacket. Like that is so Milwaukee, and it's
Mhm.
so like small city, everybody's friends,
That's
like,
right.
it just has that vibe to it. And so again, like those stories were really important for me to include. Another one is like the Milwaukee Bucks practiced for the first few years of Giannis's career at a seminary for
Yep.
priests
I saw
because they
that.
didn't have like a fancy, beautiful practice facility like most NBA franchises. And like Giannis loved it. And like it's so quirky and like all those little idiosyncrasies, like it's the reason why it worked for Giannis, if that makes sense. So I just thought that was a really cool relationship to explore.
Well, and you probably already answered most of this, but what about from the Milwaukee angle of things? You obviously spent a lot of time there. We know about how much he appreciates what the city has done for him and his family, but what is it like? I don't know if you had a chance to walk the streets with him, or I'm sure you're interviewing people in coffee shops or whatever, but I can only imagine, but what does the city view him like?
I mean, he's their hero.
Yeah.
He is everybody. From like walking into like a children's boutique to like you said, to a coffee shop, and you see someone in their 80s sitting there, like everybody knows who he is, and everyone feels this kind of like sense of pride that he's chosen their city to spend his career. So it's a really endearing kind of thing. It's a special place, it's a special community. I spent a lot of time there over the last 2 years. And I can see why it works for him and his family. He's also just not like, he doesn't love like the flashy clubs and the media and all that. Like he just kind of is a very low key guy, and Milwaukee's kind of a low key place. And yeah, it works.
Very cool. What else? I mean, people, again, the documentary premieres Amazon Prime on February 19th, which should be the day that this interview drops. Whether it's from your perspective, the family's perspective, whatever, like what else do people need to know about Giannis, his story, or what they'll be watching when they tune in this week?
Yeah, I think that something that again was unexpected to me that I learned in talking and interviewing his family is just kind of the complicated relationship that he has with his country of Greece.
Oh, that's
He
yeah, yeah.
plays for the Greek national team. He has a home in Athens where he spends most of his off seasons. So he definitely feels a connection to Athens, of course. But at the same time, it was a place that, you know, people didn't always welcome them. He was an undocumented immigrant and, you know, they experienced a lot of hardship when he was growing up. And, you know, his fiance said something that was really interesting to me when I talked to her. She was kind of like, early in our relationship, I asked him, like, why do you enjoy going back there if there were so many people that weren't accepting of you? Um, and I just thought that was a really interesting dynamic to explore. And I hope we accomplished that in the film. And, you know, it surprised me what they endured. And then also the sense of obligation and responsibility he feels to now go back and help undocumented immigrants like him in that place.
Well, and let me ask you a dumb question, but I feel like in the documentary, you discuss like almost like when he got drafted, it was such a point of like civic pride that has he helped kind of change the perception of immigrants? If I remember correctly, it was like a huge deal. He goes, 12th, 13th in the draft, and he's, this citizen of, well, I don't know if he was, but point being is like I feel like he sort of in the process of getting drafted and coming to the NBA kind of helped change that perception.
I absolutely think it did. Greece is a very homogenous place. It's predominantly white. It's predominantly Greek Orthodox. Um, and so, you know, he did have a very unique experience growing up there as a Black man, as an undocumented immigrant. And I don't think someone had a great line that didn't end up making the movie, a journalist in Greece, that like, besides like Socrates and Plato, there's never been a more famous Greek than Giannis
Sure.
Antetokounmpo, which I loved. But like, it is true. He is the most famous Greek person on the face of the earth. And
Hmm.
so I do think he's changing things for young kids in Athens that grew up similarly to him. And again, he feels like a very like a sense of responsibility. Another, again, when you make movies like this, not everything can, you know, fit in nice and neatly into the package of an hour and 40 minutes. And one thing that didn't make it into the movie was whenever he's done the NBA season each year, he doesn't tell like the media that he's flying back to Athens. He does it like under the radar. And the first place he goes to his old neighborhood and hands out basketballs, toys, and food to a lot of the undocumented. He doesn't do it for the cameras. He wouldn't let us shoot it. I asked
Mm.
him, I was like, can we film this? He was like, no. He's like, because then I'm doing it for the cameras and I'm not doing it for the reason that I'm actually doing it. So I thought that was really interesting.
And I know you have a lot of these interviews, so I'll let you go on this. What do you think? Like, because I was thinking about this, watching him and how he handles himself. What do you think it's going to be for him after basketball? Because I think like there's this, Draymond Green talks about new media, everybody's doing a podcast or this or that, and like I just again, and people will see it in the documentary, but this guy I feel like could run for political office. I feel like he could be like a private businessman and never be in the spotlight again. Like I feel like he could run the Bucks. So what do you have any and I feel like he could also be on TV if that's what he wanted to be. But like, do you have any perception of what his ambitions are beyond basketball?
So he's told me two things. He said he either wants to coach
No.
or he wants to be like Tim Duncan and he wants to go and move to a Scandinavian country or somewhere where nobody knows who he is and no one knows who his family is and he can just live a very normal life as a dad with, he said, 7 kids. He
Oh
hasn't
boy.
convinced his fiance of that yet, but yeah, I don't know. He's a mystery. He really is. Like, I could see him being great with kids though in coaching. I really could. As much as he jokes about like wanting to kind of like fade into the, you know, into the anonymity of, you know, a place. I think he's just too, I don't know, he has too many like smart things to say and to teach
Yeah.
people to just kind of go and not have an impact on the next generation. So who knows? He has a long career. He wants to
Yes.
play 20 years, he said. So he's only 10. This is his 11th season in the league. So he's a long way to go. And I know he has a lot more on the court that he wants to do and prove. So
Well, the documentary is called Giannis, The Marvelous Journey. Listen, I mean, I appreciate your time, but I would say it even if you weren't doing the interview. It is excellent. It's a family. It's like you don't have to be a basketball fan. You don't have to be an NBA fan. You don't have to be a Bucks fan. To TMI, but there's maybe a tear or two thinking about my wife and her family and how crazy they are and how much they drive each other crazy, but how much they love each other. And it premieres Monday the 19th. And I really do think people will enjoy it. So Kristen Lappas, thank you for the time. Best of luck with everything. Good luck to the Villanova Wildcats, all that. I see your dad on TV all the time. And look forward to following the journey of the movie, and we'll do this again soon.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.